Hi guys, today we're going to be going over how to fix rotted wood around your house without replacing it with a new board. You can use these steps and the product in this video to replace rotted wood trim, areas around your door frames, sometimes columns that you have that you need to repair. You can follow these steps for all of those projects. I have a small section of rotted wood around this window frame here. Some people like to also call it water damage. So the wood is very soft in this section. You can test this by just poking around your wood trim to see if you have any areas starting like this around your house to stay on top of it. Inspectors, if you're selling your house, are going to do the same thing. They're going to be poking at your trim to make sure it's not soft in any areas. The good news is that for small sections of rotting wood like you see here, you can easily repair rotting wood without replacing the whole board. What you're going to do is pick out all of the soft sections of that wood. I find it's pretty easy to use a large screwdriver for something like this because it is strong enough to really dig into all of those soft areas, and it's not so big that you can't target little tiny spots too. A small putty knife would also work too. Once I'm sure that I've removed all of the rotted wood and water damage on my trim, I move on to the epoxy step that's going to harden all of that wood around it and make sure that I've got a nice stable surface that is not going to get any more water penetration or damage to it. For this step, I'm using Abatron's Liquid Wood Epoxy Resin Kit. This is a 2-part mix, and you want equal portions of both of those parts. So I find it's really easy to just have an old container in my garage, mark it with a pencil where I want to fill it up to, and then when I'm adding both of those ingredients, I'm pretty sure I can get equal portions if I just fill up each one to that line, and then pour it into a second container to do the mixing. After pouring the second ingredient into your container, you want to mix that together for 1 minute. So I like to use like a craft stick or a paint stir stick, something like that, to mix these products together. Make sure you're wearing gloves too. It's important. This is a low VOC product, but you still don't want it touching your skin. It will get sticky and harden like a glue. After mixing it for 1 full minute, you're going to let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes before applying it to the area that you're repairing. While you're waiting for that 5 to 10 minutes, it's a good time to go in and brush away any debris or loose items that might be left behind on that wood. I'm using a cheap chippy paintbrush to apply this to all of the areas around that wood that I just removed. If you know that your water damage or your rotted wood is very shallow, you can even use this epoxy to apply it to that rotted wood and not have to remove it at all. But since mine was going back all the way through the wood, I knew it was deep into the wood, I thought the safest bet in this case was to remove all of that damaged wood. But there's definitely a case. If you have a decorative wood that has a lot of carved details in it or something like that, and you're afraid that you cannot reproduce that and make it look nice, there is a case for using the resin straight on top of that rotted decorative wood, and then you let that all harden as deep as you can, and then just fill in any cracks with the next step that I'm going to show you. So use your best judgment and decide for yourself. Are you going to remove that rotted wood, or are you going to just apply the resin over top of it and try to harden it as deeply into that wood as you can? So I made sure that I covered every bit of the exposed wood that you see here and the ends of those boards with this resin. It needs 1 to 6 hours at room temperature to completely harden. This was a really hot day. As you can see, I've got a little bit of a flower sticking to my sweaty arm. It was so hot. But I left it for probably 5 hours to make sure that it had hardened and cured enough before I went to patching the wood. The instructions on the container for this resin say that you have about 30 to 50 minutes of working with this resin before you have to stop using it, stop applying it. So I was also able to address this area of rotted wood above my roof. I'll show you how that turned out at the end of the video. After letting that resin harden for 5 hours, it was time to mix up my WoodEpox. Now, I really love this product. I have videos from like 5 years ago where I was using Bondo all-purpose putty to do wood trim repairs around my house. But in the end, after a couple of years, that Bondo would always sort of shrink up and start getting sort of soft and mushy, getting its own bit of wood rot in certain spots too. I don't know if the sun was breaking it down or if it was water damage, but this WoodEpox, I've never had any problems with it. It doesn't have any shrinkage problems with it at all. It's much easier to work with. So with Bondo, you have to quickly use it. You've got about 5 or 6 minutes before it's going to harden up on you. With this WoodEpox, you get about 20 minutes before it gets too hard. And also, it doesn't really have any smell at all, the WoodEpox. Bondo has a hugely strong chemical smell that makes you feel like you're probably getting brain damage when you're using it. So, highly, highly recommend the WoodEpox. It is more expensive, but definitely worth it. It's going to last you a lot longer and it's much safer and easier to use. Once again, make sure that you're wearing gloves while you're doing this. You're going to want to get equal parts of part A and part B of the WoodEpox. So this is a 2-part mix as well. You can just eyeball this. I like to turn it into balls and make sure the balls are the same size. And then you mix those two together until you get a solid color. You don't want to see any color distinction at all. You want to get everything mixed together really well. That takes about 1 minute for an amount that small. When you're first working with this product or mixing it together, it feels sort of like a soft Play-Doh. And then you get about 20 minutes of working with it before it starts to get too hard and you won't be able to spread it or anything anymore. And I noticed one warning that it's about to start hardening is it starts to feel warm to the skin, like it's fresh out of the oven or something. So when it starts getting warm on me, I know it's about to start harden and I won't be able to work with it anymore. So don't mix up too much at a time. I made a mistake. I repaired a column recently and I made a mistake of mixing up way more than I could possibly use before it hardened. So I was wasting product. So make sure you're always under mixing. You can always quickly mix up some more. It doesn't take any time at all. After mixing, you can start applying that directly onto the area that you need to repair. For this, you can use your hands, you can use a spatula, a putty knife, whatever you need to use to get the best application, whatever works easiest for you. I try to carve it as well as I can into the shape that I really want it to be when it's finished drying. That's going to reduce my sanding time and just make the job a little bit easier. Sometimes though, you have to build onto it. So sometimes you have to start with small amounts because of the shape of the area that you're filling in or because you're just new to it and you don't know what to do. So sometimes you have to start just by doing a couple of inches of repair and then add on that final amount once you get a good base started. So take your time and don't overthink it too much. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You can sand this just like normal wood to get the best look for your repair job. And also, the wood that you see me repairing here, that trim board, has like a normal wood texture to it. I could even carve into this once it's hardened. So once this dries, this WoodEpox is going to be hard just like wood. So I can add texturing to it. I can do all kinds of things with it just like I would normal wood. I took about 10 minutes to get this to a look that I thought was okay to let it harden before I came back to sand it. You want to make sure it's completely hardened and cured before you start sanding it. That's usually going to be 2 or 3 hours. But if you notice that it's still gummy when you start sanding it, then it's not ready yet. So just wait another hour or 2 and come back and try again. You can use an electric sander or sand by hand, just like with wood again. I'm using a coarse grit sandpaper. I think it's around a 60 or an 80 for this case because I want to remove as much of the product as possible, as quickly as possible. But you can go for 100, 120 if you're doing detail work and you're doing like a finish sand on it. I love this big sanding block for a project like this because it's helping me get that wood flat and looking like it's all one solid piece of wood. If I was doing that freehand, I don't think I'd be able to do as good of a job. You can find sanding blocks like this at almost any hardware store. I'll link to one in the description if you need it. And if this wood trim was on the front of my house, I would be taking sort of a carving tool to try to carve wood grain detail into this trim and make it look just like the trim that's all around it to make it look more realistic. This is kind of behind my air conditioners, so I don't care that I'm going to leave this one flat. But just so you know, do what you need to carve into it to make it look as realistic as possible. Once I finished sanding and I was happy with the final look, I was ready to prime that. So you have to remove all of the dust from all of the sanding that you've just done, make that surface really clean, and then you apply an exterior-based primer. So you have to make sure you're using an exterior primer. Let that primer dry according to the directions on the container, and then you apply your exterior paint. So make sure you're always using exterior paints whenever you're working outside because it's going to resist mold and mildew better than an interior paint, and it's going to hold up to the sun too. Okay guys, here's a look at the finished window trim after I finished painting it, and here's a look at that repair job that I did on that trim that was along my roof line. That's it for how to repair rotting wood without replacing it. As always, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I do try to answer them whenever I get a chance. All right, good luck with your project, guys.